another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and we are recapping week one for you all. What a great week of college football. It's finally here. Fresh. These games have been absolutely incredible. And I just couldn't even believe what we are watching at some of these moments. So I'm joined by my co-host Fresh, as I've already said here. Fresh, what were your thoughts on this weekend? Amazing weekend.
I would think it's craziness and competition. We've talked about it in the preview. We talked about it before, where there is no preseason games for college. It's just you have months of just inter squad scrimmages and practices, and now you finally get to hit something. We've also mentioned preseason rankings and how some of those are based off of last year or assumptions and jokes, but you really don't know what you're going to get until the games even start. And even then, we probably won't know anything for a couple more weeks. But the excitement, the energy, the craziness so far has been amazing in week one. I'm going to go ahead and just say Arkansas. You have a huge matchup, top 25 team. Cincinnati comes in, and you battled it out. Neither team played flawlessly, but you were able to make enough plays in the second half, maintain focus, drive through, and execute in the fourth quarter to win a game against a very, very good football team in Cincinnati and a very good coach in Luke Fickell. That's a sign of Sam Pittman and that Arkansas program turning the corner a little bit. Yeah, it's only one game and it's a season opener, but that was a big step in the right direction of winning a ranked game, especially with where their schedules lined up. So big, tip of the cap to Arkansas and the Razorbacks.
Yeah, I was impressed. I wound up watching quite a bit of that Arkansas Cincinnati game, and my takeaway was about the same as yours there. Cincinnati is nothing to scoff at, and I think a lot of people now respect that program that they've built there under Luke Fickell. But great job by the Razorbacks to pull out a win. They kind of were leading that whole game, and it looked for a moment Cincinnati was going to come back and kind of pull off the upset. But I really liked what the Razorbacks did. KJ Jefferson, amazing game out of him. I'm very impressed. If he continues to improve as a passer, you better watch out for Arkansas.
Yeah, it's just the development of that offense, getting comfortable with the new receivers, but his focus and his drive as a quarterback is going to really take them places if we can keep it going.
All right, so my first winner of the weekend is the men of Troy over there out at USC. Not a big game that probably a lot of you watched out there. USC playing Rice and did exactly what we thought they were going to do. The offense put up 530 yards. The defense wound up picking off Rice 3 times and taking all 3 of those back 4 touchdowns. That's huge. There was a lot of questions on what Lincoln Riley was going to be doing over there in LA. I think that we kind of got a lot of answers. That is going to be a very good USC team. Caleb Williams showed off why he is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in all of college football. Had a true dual threat game out of him. Wound up completing 86% of his passes and was averaging over 11 yards a carry during that game. I was really impressed, even though the talent level of Rice isn't that great. It's what you expect to see when a top flight team plays a school like that.
Well, like last year, there were times where USC didn't look dominant in games they should be. Just on paper with the name. A lot of pressure on Lincoln Riley, a lot of pressure on that entire team, and the way they came in and just took care of business. And they played with a USC swagger that we have not seen in maybe a decade. I don't know. It's been a long time, but yeah, it's only one game. But they came out and they did what they had to do, and they did it with dominating fashion.
All right, Fresh, who you got as a second winner this weekend?
Well, I'm gonna be a homer. I'm just gonna say the way that Georgia came out and played versus Oregon. No one really. We all had our thoughts they're gonna play well, and maybe Oregon to give us more of a game. But the way they came out and dominated, and Kirby didn't hold up. There's sometimes you maybe thought if they had a lead, would he hold back on Dan Lanning, his former assistant, and maybe take it easy on him. But the way he kept the pressure on him, it showed this team is not going to lay back, and there's some talent. Yeah, it's game one, but they played in dominating fashion. They ran the ball. They threw the ball really well. Defense played ferocious. It was the kind of game you want to see as an opener. Is Oregon the number 11 team in the country? Obviously not. We had them ranked at
No.
24, 25. but it was a win with everyone on the all eyes on you. No one really knew what to expect. Stetson Bennett come back. They lost a lot of guys, but the way they came out and dominated from start to finish is a sight that has not really been seen from a team with high expectations in Georgia. Usually they come in and they build up to it, but the way they came in and dominated it, it set the tone for the rest of the season and put other teams on notice.
Yeah, Georgia played a phenomenal game, and there's nothing to take away from them and how well they played. Uh, you're looking at Georgia, though. This is what you expect to do. But I got a little more. I'll save my stuff about Oregon here in a little bit. So, Fresh, my next winner, if you're going to say Georgia, I'm going down to the swamp and talking about the Florida Gators. We were low on the Florida Gators last year. Man, I kept thinking about this, how much of a difference a year makes from going from Dan Mullen to Billy Napier. Utah is not a bad team. That is a darn good football team with the Utah Utes. They challenge themselves. They take on an SEC opponent. They go to the swamp, especially in early September. Whereas if any of you listen to any of our preview podcasts, Fresh continuously told them, you better start hydrating now. Better start hydrating now. Hydrate a week early. Get that Pedialyte in you. Florida, I was impressed. I was really impressed with what they did. They went toe to toe with a very, very tough Utah team. Anthony Richardson looked impressive, especially running the football. He's very similar to KJ Jefferson to me. He's got a lot of growth to do as a passer, and if he's able to make that growth as a passer, watch out for the Gators. But I was super impressed with what they did on the ground. The ground attack was extremely impressive, and I think Fresh in our preview episode, you told us about what Billy Napier's goal was for them to run the football and be very, very tough. They wound up running for 272 yards, 4 touchdowns. The defense has definitely got some work to do there in Gainesville. They can't afford to give up 225 yards themselves on the ground, but this was a very, very positive first step for the Florida Gators. Maybe getting back into that conversation and being that second, third place team in the SEC East.
Richardson played phenomenal. A much different product yesterday than it was under Dan Mullen. He looked more comfortable in the offense. He looked more freedom. He didn't always have to check with Mullen and say, "All right, do this, do that." He was able to play within himself and use his athletic ability, especially in that 2-point conversion. Where I don't know, and either of you, if we tried that a million times, we wouldn't be able to do that. So there's definitely a lot of explosion there, and the team builds off of him. You saw the way they kept rallying around him in that football game. Offensive line played, decently well. I think there were still times where Utah was in the backfield, and that's where Richardson used his ability. Etienne, the freshman running back, Travis Etienne's brother, flashed some skills there. So if he can continue to develop along with John, the rest of that backfield, they have something to work with there in Gainesville. Ventrell Miller, who didn't really play much at all last year at linebacker, he came out of a cannon and played really, really well. And I think I tweeted out during the football game, we were in Jacksonville. It's about 65 miles, northeast of Gainesville. At 7:45, it felt like 92 degrees, the humidity at 85%. It's obviously much different and more hot and more humid in Gainesville. So you can just imagine what the heat was down there, middle of the football game into the fourth quarter. And you saw some Utah players sort of cramping or throwing up in that third quarter, fourth quarter. So it hits you harder and differently, and that's wore them down. But one thing I still was scratching my head as, why didn't Utah run the quarterback sneak from second and goal from the half of the, not even the half-yard line? They kept handing it off, and then on that fourth down play, they fumbled it. You do know you're allowed to take the snap and you literally just push forward, and the running back and fullback can push you into the end zone. When that happened and Florida got that fumble, it was over. They had the energy, they made the stop, and they just took off from there and went on and win the football game.
Yeah, and it's difficult to play in the swamp at night, especially here in early September. All right, Fresh, my third winner of the week. Oh, wait, it's your turn. My bad. Who's your third winner?
My third winner.
Oh, you're talking about Florida. I kind of thought they were yours.
My third winner are the two other schools in the state of North Carolina, ECU and App State.
Ooh.
The way that they both played, we kind of knew it was going to be a dogfight anyway, but getting UNC and NC State at home, they made both those big-time schools fight for every little thing. They lost both those games by combined 3 points. They both literally came down to the final play. I'm still shocked at the UNC App State game, going back and forth, returning the onside kick, and then not running the clock out. And then the poor kicker there for the Pirates missing an extra point and missing a go-ahead field goal. UNC and NC State got a lot of work to do, especially the expectations we have for the Wolfpack. But huge effort there for ECU and for App State. to rise up and show that it's not just about the two power programs, and they're going to be there, and they're going to be in the conversation for the AAC and for the Sun Belt, and beyond going forward.
So I had ECU as a winner slash loser. I was going to kind of save this there for you, Fresh. This was going to be kind of my transitional piece, but I'm going to jump in right now since you brought them up. I was impressed with what they got over there in Greenville. That's a talented football team. We talked a little bit about ECU at the end of last season, right when they were playing Cincinnati at that last week. There is a lot of talent in Greenville, North Carolina. If you've ever been there, that is a very rabid fan base. And I know it seems weird, like ECU, why would the ECU Pirates be like this big fan base? And they love their football team over there. That's a tough place to go in and play. If you, ECU is not far from Jacksonville, North Carolina, really really tough area to be in. But I have you also as a loser because you put yourself into a position to let the kicker decide the game for you. And you know, if you're going to be a team that's going to, it's a close loss, but how much more would we be talking about ECU if they pulled off that upset? If they would have hit the extra point to tie it, or if they would have hit the field goal at the end of regulation to win it, we would have been having this different conversation about ECU going into this year, about how they pulled this great upset on North Carolina State, and oh my gosh, North Carolina State let us down. It changes the conversation. Instead of us saying, hey, North Carolina, a win's a win. North Carolina State wins a win. You're out of there. You're 1-0. You get a chance to go 2-0 next weekend. And you get to build on this game. Okay, you take with what you didn't do well, you make it, you get better at it. But our conversation would have been completely different if ECU would have pulled up. Great effort by the Pirates, but I still kind of have them in the loser category because, hey, your record only shows you as 0-1 now instead of 1-0.
Like Bill Parcells says, you're only as good as your record says you are.
All right, Fresh. One of my other winners was the Ohio State defense. If you guys listened to us at all last year, you know that I was rough on the Ohio State defense, starting with the Oregon game last year, and actually even probably the Minnesota game to start the season. I ripped apart Ohio State's defense. Called them trash. I thought that they were completely overrated. I was so impressed with how the defense played against Notre Dame last night. Looking at them, they held Notre Dame to 253 yards of total offense. But if you take out the very, very first drive of the game, Notre Dame goes down. Those plays are very scripted. They're built to get some momentum going. They got 56 yards on a field goal on that. If you take out that first drive, Ohio State's defense holds Notre Dame to 197 yards of total offense. I believe I saw the stat that they held them to 72 yards of total offense in the second half alone. Notre Dame could not get anything going against the Buckeye defense. I've called for the Buckeyes to go back to the Silver Bullet defense. It was only fitting to see them honoring the 2002 national title team, to see Jim Tressel back at Ohio State, seeing the players hoist him up on their shoulders. It reminded me of a Tressel defense. It was fast. It was exciting. It attacked the football. And I even made the comment to my dad as we're watching this game of how fast the Buckeye defenders got to the football. It was something that we didn't see a year ago. We didn't see them closing in on the ball carrier when they threw a little screen pass or they had a guy running off tackle. You saw the defense get to the football, attack the football, and tackle well to the ground. Really impressed by Ohio State. There's, again, same thing I'm going to say about Ohio State. Great first impression on that defense. This schedule isn't easy. They got work to do. There's a lot that, and again, I'm going to say you are circling that game Thanksgiving weekend in November after seeing what type of offense that school up north put on the field. That's going to be the game where we're going to find out how good this Ohio State defense is. But this was a great first impression, great first job by the Ohio State defense. Like to see a little bit more from the offense, but impressed by the defense.
Well, one thing we were talking about all off season as well, and I'm talking with you, talk with our buddy Parks, is Ohio State offensively and defensively maybe not as tough last year as they have been in years past. And just seeing the grit and the toughness of having to win a slug it out football game. They didn't score 42 points. They didn't, light it up, JSN, getting hurt, unfortunately, and really hope that he can heal because the kid had a lot ahead of him, and you don't want to see him, have a season ruined like that. So hopefully he can heal up real quick and get him back to 100%. But the offense wasn't chucking it around the yard like we saw last year. They had to grind it out and win it in the fourth quarter. They had to have their full attention on for a full 60 minutes. They couldn't put it in, you know, just cruise control in the second half. They had to be locked in. They had to win on the offensive line. They had to win on the defensive line. And they had to play a very stout and stingy Notre Dame defense and find ways to get points. And then their defense had to shake off last year, adapt, and overcome. It was refreshing to see an old school kind of Ohio State win, especially with the 2002 team, like you mentioned there, where Craig Krenzel, that offense, and Maurice Clarett, they weren't putting up 50 a game. They were winning games 24-10 or something like that. It was that same kind of fashion of a grit, nasty, drawn out battle. And I think that actually will do more good for Ohio State down the stretch than them winning 42-0 in a blowout win.
Yeah, I think sometimes winning those close games, especially against elite level team, say what you want to say about Notre Dame, that is a really, really good football team. And the fact is, that's a really good defense. We've talked about how, I believe you brought up that the Northwestern transfer might be the best transfer in all of college football. We're big fans of J.D. Bertram as a linebacker, and there's so many other positive players on that Notre Dame defense that holding an Ohio State team down to 21 points, again, it sucks that JSN got injured in that game, wasn't able to see his full potential. But there's a lot of positives that Notre Dame can take on and build on because I think they said on game day, Notre Dame doesn't play any one of Ohio State's talent after this game. This is something that they can build on. Even if, you lose this game, you say, okay, Ohio State's the number 2 team in the country. We're going to keep building. We're going to keep getting better, and we got a shot at this playoff.
I mean, I'm really excited, actually, now you mentioned it, but UNC, the offense they put up yesterday, I want to see Notre Dame's going to get a chance to put their defense up against that offense. And then USC, the last week of the year, chance to put their defense up against Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison in that group. So this is a chance for Marcus Freeman to set the bar here and where you can improve and get ready for those matchups down the road. Those should be some really intriguing, cat and mouse games going forward.
Hey, question for you. Do we know if our buddy Lance has got tickets to that BYU Notre Dame game in Vegas?
He has tickets. He will be in the Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas for the BYU Cougars and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
So, look at what BYU did at South Florida. I know South Florida is a kind of a dumpster fire this year, but man, that's going to be a fun one too.
Good old offense.
Don't sleep on the Cougars.
Don't sleep on the Cougs.
Fresh guy, more winners?
I think the only other winner is looking at that exciting game. It kind of got hidden, but Houston Cougars, another Cougar.
Ooh, I'm glad you bring this up.
Triple overtime action. Kind of was late last night. Kind of got hidden between the Ohio State Notre Dame game and the Utah Florida game. Two great football teams. We have high hopes for both, potentially both being conference champions. The way they went back and forth there in San Antonio, it was exciting football and really kept you on the edge of your seat. And you watch it, you see stats, you see scores, what college football is really meant to be.
Yeah, and I'm just going to piggyback right off here, Fresh. My last winner of the weekend was all of us college football fans. If you stayed up to watch the games on Thursday night, that West Virginia Pitt game, bringing back the backyard brawl for 11 years, like, if that doesn't prove we need that game every single year, I don't know what else would have you. And this is one of the things that I talked to some other people about why we do this podcast. As you guys notice, this podcast is not about a single team. It's not about a single conference. There's hundreds of podcasts out there that focus in on only a singular conference or our homer, about Ohio State or about Georgia or Florida or Alabama. There's only those. We always said that we were focusing on college football as a whole, going back to what college game day, what we grew up with, what we went to college with, the conversations that Fresh and I used to have when we were college roommates. And, I kept back and I was sitting there thinking as we were watching the game, and I think we were texting back and forth during it, Fresh, that this reminded me of our college football weekends. Those Thursday night games reminded me of the stuff we did together with our other two friends, Steve-O and rest in peace, Marty. Those were exciting games. Penn State and Purdue, they're sloppy. I'm not going to say they're the best played football games, But you're not a college football fan if you can't sit back and say, those were good football games. Those fun game to watch. Doesn't do Are any of those four teams probably going to make the playoffs? Probably not. But that's good football. That's entertaining football. And that's what college football is there for. It's for us to be entertained by it. It's not just to sit there and say it's only one team during one week. You have the NFL for that. College football is a smorgasbord of games, and you can get a little bit of here. You can get these offensive games. You can get this pounded out defensive game. I don't know. I after Thursday night, I was just riding on such a high going into the weekend. I was just like, this is what college football is all about.
I mean, you want the upsets, you want the craziness as long as your team does not get upset. But that's what you want. You want the crazy ball bounce and hit off a couple of guys' hands. Dude catches it, runs it back 80 yards like the guy from Purdue, and then, goes, viral for throwing up on the sideline. Or, even seeing the story of Sean Clifford where he has it coming off that bad knee injury, deal with some stuff during the ball game, didn't look very good. And then that last drive, like he flipped the switch and was flawless and marched the Nittany Lions right down the field and won the football game. Completely different player. Just sort of seeing the way that the game, goes into play, or watching the craziness of Virginia Tech for the second time going to Norfolk, going to Old Dominion, and getting beat. The last two times they've been there, they have lost. I've been in that stadium because Jacksonville University, when I worked there in 2010, actually played at ODU in their first ever game in that stadium, and JU beat them. But it's a small little environment. I understand why the elevator didn't work and the coaches couldn't get back down, but that's the stuff that you don't really expect that has an impact and makes it so much fun.
All right, Fresh. Well, you hit it right there. Let's start with our losers of the weekend. Who you got?
My losers are the referees in the Illinois-Indiana game. I mean, countless mistakes across the board. I know it's week one for the refs too, but it was just pretty bad. The worst, though, was on the final drive when Indiana's driving to hit the game-winning touchdown. Illinois has 16, 17 guys on the field. Indiana snaps the ball. They run a play, and then the referees just stop it and say, no penalty. We're picking up the flag, and we're going to add 7 seconds back on the clock. And it took them 8 minutes to figure that out. That could have cost Indiana the football game by picking up the flag. There's too many guys in the field. It was just a chaos, and it was more of like the crescendo of the way that game was refereed. But that effort in the Illinois Indiana game was terrible. The announcers had enough. The fans had enough. I had enough. It was at one point even unwatchable, just because the way they kept stopping and using 6-7 minutes to review stuff and discuss it. You should know the rules. You should know what's a penalty. You should know what you're doing. There's too many men on the field is a pretty obvious call. Make it right, get it done. Do not delay the game. We do not want this to become like a college basketball or NBA game in the fourth quarter or the second half when it's 57, time stoppages and reviews and the game ends up going 6 hours. Get better, figure it out, make that transition from week one to week two. But please, know how many guys are on the field. If it's a flag and call it right.
So my first loser of the weekend is Virginia Tech, and you kind of let off with them, Fresh. Second time you've lost to Old Dominion. Old Dominion only has 2 wins over FBS teams, and both of them are Virginia Tech. Gosh, this hurts me to say. And we talked about this last year about Florida State and how we were both kind of done with Florida State. Like they let us down. Neither one of us were Florida State fans or really cared one way or another about Florida State. Virginia Tech is a little bit different for me because I like Virginia Tech. I'm not like a fan of them, but I like the university. I like their fan base. I love their intro for a home game. I think that Blacksburg is one of the greatest home field advantages in college football. It saddens me to see how far this program has fallen. It saddens me to see Frank Beamer's Virginia Tech teams are completely gone. The Michael Vick teams are gone. The Marcus Vick teams are gone. Shoot, go back to when Virginia Tech played the home and home against Ohio State, and those were competitive teams. Virginia Tech has always been a team that I was always nervous about and had a lot of respect for, and it's just so sad. Grant Wells thrown 4 picks. They commit 14 penalties for 115 yards. Come on, man. Virginia, this goes back to, I wrote an article about Nebraska and them firing need to fire Scott Frost because the fan base deserves better. I'm going to say the exact same thing about Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech fans deserve better than this, and I feel bad that I have to call them a loser out of this weekend, but they really are. The football team is letting down that fan base there, and they deserve better.
Yeah, I mean, it's a new coach, it's first game, but he's been at Virginia Tech. He knows the standard when as he coming back. But the players should have a little more pride. It's unacceptable the past few years, and it's a weird thing is they beat North Carolina to open up the year last year. We were all like, oh, maybe they're back, and they're obviously not. They need to figure it out there in Blacksburg, and they need, the players need to invest in themselves. They need to get in the meeting room and the weight room, and put in as much effort as possible to get better.
All right, Fresh, who you got for another loser this weekend?
UCLA fans are the losers. It is absolutely pathetic. Yes, I know UCLA was playing our producer Drew's Almada and Bowling Green, but if you want to have a football program that's actually worth something, and you want to have the players play, their ability and compete for a Pac-12 title, or even help make the transition to the Big Ten, you have some players there in Charbonnet and DTR, etc. Was like 10,000 people in the Rose Bowl? 10,000 maybe? 12, 15? I don't know. It still looks like nothing because you sit 100 there.
Wow.
It was absolutely horrible for an opener. I know it's California, a lot of things to do in LA, but if you're a student, if you're a fan, invest, because if you want that team to be any good, you need to make the effort. Because if recruits are seeing nobody there and they're not making an effort, what's the point of me going to UCLA? That program's going to be dead. You've got to help support the team. You look at big powerhouse schools or even just fan bases, like we're talking about Virginia Tech's fan base. They will pack Lane Stadium if the team is not very good. They'll still be there. They deserve a winner. UCLA fans, you're making no effort to inspire the team or inspire recruits to want to go there. They're all going to go to USC. They're going to go somewhere else, and you're going to keep wondering why we're terrible. And then poor old Chip Kelly is going to end up biting the dust for it, and he's going to get fired because the team's not winning. But nobody wants to go. You can't recruit to an empty, dust bowl. You've got to be better.
So I'll stay over there on the West Coast there, Fresh. My next loser, I didn't realize that there were that few fans at that game. My other loser this weekend is Boise State. Losing to Oregon State, we thought early on this year, we had a couple of teams that were, the outside team looking in that could make a run this year. Boise State was one of those teams. They only had 311 yards of total offense against Beavers defense that wasn't very good. They gave up 470 yards, 5 turnovers, 3 picks, 2 fumbles. They're down 24-0 at halftime and 27-3 until Taylon Green runs 74 yards for a touchdown. I'm disappointed with the Broncos, man. I thought that they could be one of those really feel-good stories that we might be talking about all year. But after this loss, yeah, I think it's just going to be kind of an afterthought that we know, and maybe Boise State pulls off an upset. Maybe they'll jump back into the winner category at some point this year, but very disappointed in the Broncos.
I mean, Hank Bachmeier, you're a veteran quarterback, and you were making mistakes left and right. I watched the first half of that football game, and it was terrible. And the Mountain West is not a pushover. You have Fresno State, San Diego State, Utah State's a defending champion. There's Air Force is very good. Colorado State will be better in time with Norvell and that offense getting going there. You're going to fall far behind if you don't get going. And having a chance like that to beat Oregon State, who has not been to a bowl game in a long time.
All right, Fresh, you got any more losers? I got one.
Biggest loser, Iowa. Look, Iowa, I get it. You're not the offensive powerhouse, but it's South Dakota State, and you win 7-3. And it's not just the touchdown to a field goal. You had 2 safeties from your defense that the reason why you got the total 7 points. Kirk Ferentz, you need to figure something out. I know you lost your running back Goodson's, in the NFL right now, but you should have offensive linemen to be able to dictate the line of scrimmage and run with anybody behind them and be able to get a couple touchdowns and pull it away. That was absolutely horrific offensively. And it's a shame for that defense being wasted. If you think you're going to be able to compete in the Big Ten by scoring 7 points over an FCS opponent, and via 2 safeties, you have a lot of things coming because the Big Ten is not a pushover. Minnesota's going to be good. Purdue's going to be solid. Northwestern's going to be good. Wisconsin's going to be Wisconsin. You are going to fall into that Northwest, the Nebraska situation. Don't fade. I know it's a solid program, but you need to make changes on offense to get it going because that was terrible.
We'll find out a lot about Iowa next weekend playing for that Cyhawk trophy, man. Because Iowa State, Matt Campbell had that offense humming.
Really weird. They look terrible, and then the Cyhawk comes along and they find a way to win. So Iowa State actually has more pressure on them.
It's interesting because we have a good friend of the show who listens out there in Vegas, Lions, who is a huge Iowa fan. And that's been kind of the conversation that we've had multiple times is how good is this Iowa's offense there? And I think he hates Spencer Petras more than we hate Graham Mertz. But we'll get to Mr. Mertz and Petrus later. That's a debate for a different show there, Fresh.
That's a whole episode itself.
Yeah, who's the worst quarterback in the Big Ten? All right, Fresh, my last loser is the Oregon Ducks. Overrated by the media. We had them at 25. I think we were pretty accurate. I think they deserve to be in the top 25, but they are not the 11th best team in the country. Now, Georgia played a phenomenal game. Doesn't take anything away from Georgia, but we need to talk about how bad they were. And that you trusted Bo Nix. You trusted Bo Nix to lead your offense. First mistake right there. We have been, there's a reason Auburn gave up on a legacy. Auburn gave up on a legacy student that they thought that they would be better off without him. We heard all offseason that Dan Lanning was going to give Oregon the secrets of the Georgia defense. And that also proved completely not to be true. You have Noah Sewell, you have all of these high-end defensive players that are highly rated, but then Georgia is allowed to kind of move the ball up and down the field all day long. It's not a good look. Oregon, you've lost 4 of the last 5 of the games you played. Your losses go Utah, you beat Oregon State only by 10 in a rivalry game, lose to Utah again, lose to Oklahoma, and now you lose to Georgia. 4 of your last 5 games that you played have been losses. All of those are marquee opponents. Oregon is now on that slippery slope going down. They are looking like they are going to be one of they're not even a top 5 team in the Pac-12 probably right now. It's a sad state for the Oregon Ducks. I hope they can pull the nose up there. But yeah, if the media thinks that Oregon is a top 25 team, like right now, if we're redoing our rankings going into this after this weekend, Fresh, I wouldn't have Oregon ranked in our top 25. Would you?
No way. I would not have them ranked in the top 25. I think that roster, you brought in some transfers. Maybe Cristobal knew the cupboard was bare. But in the end, Dan Lanning's going to have to do some recruiting. He's known for being a recruiter. He's recruited a place, but he's going to do a heck of a job there at Oregon. And Phil Knight and Nike, they're going to have to start helping out with NIL because NIL right now is dictating and driving the recruitment, speeches. You've got to have the conversations with the players, but you also got to show them that you can make an investment to draw these top talent there to Oregon because they could get past, especially with USC recharged and Utah getting some national exposure. And if they go to if USC leaves and goes to the Big Ten, there's nothing in the Pac-12 that's really attractive for anyone to go to Oregon anyway. So they've got to do a whole reset because that team right now, there's some players, but they don't look like a team. They're individuals.
Yeah, that was a conversation that we never really had. Maybe that's the reason Cristobal left. You want to say all that Miami was his alma mater and family being there, but sometimes you realize, hey, I'm not going to win with this roster, and it could cost me my job. And Cristobal left, went down to Miami. Miami looked phenomenal, and Oregon looked like a joke. So
there's a story out there, they will fire you for the reason they hired you. And so sometimes you might want to get out ahead of it if you know it's about to fall. Hey, I'm going to prevent that from happening, and I'm going to dictate my own path, and I'm going to decide my own future.
Yeah. All right, Fresh, you got any more?
Outside of that, I think the fans are the biggest winners of the whole thing. Like you mentioned
heck
earlier,
yeah.
Great weekend. We got more games coming forward, and week 2 will just be better. So it's just going to be college football's back. The excitement, the stadiums, except for UCLA, we're all full with people passionate and ready to go, and it's a great time. And we're just moving forward towards September.
Yeah, folks, make sure you're following us out there on Twitter at the Irrational Confidence podcast. We are putting out every week. We're letting you guys decide the 5th game that we're going to preview each and every week. There is a poll out there. It's going to expire around Sunday nights every time we put it out there. We want that poll to be out there. But have a voice. Jump in, interact with us, talk to us. We love hearing your takes from different sides. We're confident in our picks here because, we all obviously know what we're talking about at all times. Even if I say that Oregon is going to cover the spread, but that's the whole time and place for a different conversation. But make sure you're interacting with us, follow us along, like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Amazon Pods, Good Pods, whatever pods out there. And make sure you're leaving us those 5-star reviews because, Fresh and I, we're those 5-star prospects. Whether you're watching us on the YouTube or anything else like that, love it. Had our most viewed episode of all time in our week 1 episode there, Fresh. I was pretty impressed by that. It's showing that this thing has grown. We have 15,000 people following us on Twitter. Make sure that you're jumping on the train. Get on board with us right now because, this thing is only pulling out of the station here. We're going to be pulling and going into full gear as this one is going to happen. And I'm excited about week 2, man. I'm excited. Alabama, Texas is Texas going to be ready to go in to the SEC in a few years here.
That's going to be an amazing football game. Like you said, we won't reveal them now, but the slate for week 2 is going to be exciting, and I can't wait to that preview episode and get going.
And make sure you're going to spinnablesports.com because the Irrational Confidence Podcast is part of Spinnable Sports. So checking us out at spinnablesports.com. There's some cool articles out there. We found out that the college football playoff system is going to be expanding in the coming years. Find out why that's going to happen in 2026 and probably not in 2024. There's a lot of hoops to jump through there. Whether or not you're looking for a conference previews done by my co-host here, Fresh, or whether or not you're wondering why Nebraska has not fired Scott Frost yet. So check all that stuff out there. We got some NFL stuff coming for you as well by our producer, Drew. So make sure if you are into the NFL as well as college football, you're checking us out there at spinnablesports.com. We're coming back at you with another episode very, very soon. And from poolside, have a great week, people.
Bye, y'all.